Hello everyone, welcome to Insight in Conversation. I'm Phoebe Weston-Evans, Project and Research Coordinator at ALIA. I'm joining you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri lands, and I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and welcome any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people attending today's session. Would love to see in the chat which lands you're joining from too, so feel free to use that. We're recording this session, so it will be available on the ALIA YouTube channel. And I'll share the link with registrants, and you're welcome to share this with others who might like to see it. I have been really looking forward to this session today as an opportunity to introduce and to have a chat with our new and re-elected board members. So today we are joined by Clare Thorpe, Director of Library Services at Southern Cross University, who's been re-elected to the board, and new board directors, Janette Wright, Director of Federation University Library, Kathryn, Eyre, Head of Pittwater House Schools Library, and unfortunately Macdonald, who is the fourth new board member, couldn't be with us today, but they've kindly made a pre-record that I'll play at the end. The ALIA Constitution has recently been changed to increase from 2 years to 3 years for future directors, so you'll be seeing and hearing from these for years to come. So welcome, Kathryn, Clare and Janette. We have a couple of questions that each of you are going to respond to, and just to keep it simple, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So Kathryn, then Clare, then Janette. And for people listening in, please put your comments and questions in the chat, and we will get to them if we have time. So my first question was, can you tell us about your pathways or some of the highlights of your pathways to your current professional role and in relation to ALIA and your role as board member? Over to you, Kathryn.
Hello everybody, and thanks for that welcome, Phoebe. I'm Kathryn, and I'm coming to you from the lands of the Gadigal people in Sydney, on the northern beaches of Sydney. So welcome everybody. My pathway started about 30 years ago, and I've been an educator since then and a teacher librarian for over 10 years of that time. In my 20s, I travelled through the world and I worked overseas. I taught English in Japan, and I've also taught in the UK. As part of that, I've also taught across all school sectors. So I've taught in the independent sector, Catholic, the public sectors. And I've also taught all age groups from primary age all the way through to adults. So all the way along, I've had a strong interest in literature and literacy and the benefits of both. Currently, I'm the head of library at a K-12 school, and I continue that interest as well as now promoting the importance of libraries and librarians and how we contribute to such a better world. I've reached a career point where I have accumulated knowledge and experience, and it's time to share that more widely and contribute even further. I'm actively involved in state and national organisations, and that allows me to contribute my learning, but also to continue with my individual learning, and that's a very important aspect because we never stop learning ourselves. I'm a judge for the Children's Book Council of Australia Book of the Year Awards for the older readers. I'm a reviewer for the Premier's Reading Challenge New South Wales, their book lists. I write and publish book reviews in a couple of different literacy magazines. And I'm currently a committee member for the Children's Book Council of Australia New South Wales branch. As ALIA board member, I really hope to continue to guide the direction of our profession using my experience and knowledge. And I want to ensure that all sectors of ALIA membership are represented, including, but not limited to, school libraries.
Thanks, Kathryn. Clare.
Thanks, Phoebe. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm joining you today from beautiful Yungamere country at the southern tip of the Gold Coast. So my library career started in the year 2000 when I undertook full-time study to change careers and find a profession that better aligned with my personal values. So my work's been predominantly in academic libraries with a 9-year stint at the State Library of Queensland in the middle. I guess most of the decisions that I make in my career are very pragmatic and often probably quite selfish. I didn't join ALIA as a student. In fact, I was actively discouraged by some of the lecturers at the time from doing so. But I did join after attending the very first New Librarians Symposium mainly because there was a discount offered to delegates. I have remained a member ever since, mainly because I feel that my membership gives me visibility over our entire industry and the innovations that are happening in sectors that I'm not working in. It keeps me from getting too blinkered in my own work. Plus, the people and the connections that I've made through ALIA activities have opened so many doors for me, both in professional roles, in leadership opportunities, and in some wonderful friendships. It's also kept me connected during times of parental leave and other career interruptions. I've contributed a little bit to ALIA groups over the year. I've occasionally written for INCITE, and I've been on a couple of committee conferences. When I first ran for the board a couple of years ago, it was partly because I felt that I hadn't really given back enough to an association that had given me so much. But it was also selfish because I knew I could learn some skills and knowledge by serving on the board that I couldn't get through other workplace or PD activities. And it's been an absolute joy and delight. It has been the most intellectually stimulating work I've ever been involved in. And I'm very thrilled to have the opportunity to serve a second term.
Great, thanks so much, Claire. And Janette, let's hear about your pathway highlights.
Well, thank you, Phoebe, and thank you for inviting me to participate. And I think many of you do know me. I've been around probably longer than all of you, and I've worked in so many different sectors of the library industry. And today I'm coming to you from Wadawurrung country, which is around Ballarat, and I'm working with Federation University Library here. But you know that I have worked in public libraries, state libraries, academic libraries. I've worked for consortia, Caval, the vendors, system vendors, publisher vendors, aggregators. I've been a library consultant. I've been an educator, even a cataloguer. But most of my professional career has been as a manager of library services. So put me on a reference desk and I'm next to useless. But I do work pretty hard at advocating for the libraries that I work with or work for. And they have been in many places. I started out in Perth, and I've worked in Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane and Adelaide and Paris and Boston and in the Middle East. So I've been around a long time. But what that means is that I regard the library industry as really part of my family. And it's always been there to support me when I've had some spectacular ends of some career pathways. And I feel that the library profession is there supporting all of us. We're not in competition like you are when you're in business. So I feel that it's a very powerful association. And my work with ALIA, which predates and goes right back to when it was the Library Association of Australia, includes being on the conference committees for EdLib, which was the educators group, in 1982 and 1984. I was on the National Board of Education. I was elected to the General Council, which predates the Board of Directors. And I've been on many accreditation panels for library programs. I was also on the board of the National Film and Sound Archive, which gave me quite a different view about managing collections and how important they are to Australia's history and sense of identity. And during that time, I was also chair of the Indigenous Collections Policy Group and worked quite a lot with Indigenous stakeholders at that time, right across the country. So as I said, I regard the library sector as family, and I'm continuing to learn. I've recently been assigned the responsibility to liaise with the Health Libraries Association. And in the last few weeks, people like Anne Ritchie and others who have been educating me about the work of the health librarians. So I'm really happy to be on the board and working with all of you.
Thanks so much, you three. It's so great to hear what a breadth and depth of experience and professional expertise we have guiding us. The next question was to do with diversity, and ALIA President Vicky Edmond chose the theme of diversity for her tenure. And so I was wondering, how do you interpret diversity and how do you further this in your work? Over to Kathryn.
Yes, diversity, it's such a great theme, and it's clearly the buzzword at the moment. However, it's not really a buzzword, is it? Because diversity and the need for it is very, very real, and it's absolutely integral for a fair and wonderful world, which is what we're all aiming for. We need to absorb diversity into ourselves and our daily lives on such a level that it becomes so common that we don't even notice it anymore, and that it's not a buzzword, it's just there as part of our beings. And there's lots of different ways of doing this, and they can be micro or macro ways. Some simple ways, my social media accounts, they all have my pronouns attached. Now, that's really small picture to me, but it's a big picture elsewhere, and it contributes to a bigger picture. Pronouns are a really simple way of just showing an awareness and acknowledgement that there are options beyond male and female. Really, really simple. Equally on webinars and Zoom meetings, the first thing I do is jump in and rename myself and attach my pronouns. Really simple things, but can have a big difference. I choose to attend events and professional learning, which educates me about diversity. And then I take that education and I take it back with me in my career and in my daily life and disseminate that information, which is, of course, what our main role as librarians is. And that it also includes events that I have control over. So when I'm choosing authors and presenters, I look for ones that have a diverse background or represent a diverse group of people or discuss diverse themes. I am a member of ALIA's Rainbow Group, which is quite a new group. And aside from all the wonderful benefits of being a part of an ALIA group, I gain a different perspective beyond my own lived experience. And I become aware of different needs and concerns outside of my own lived experience. And that's what we really need to do, regardless of our levels of diversity. I recently presented at ALIA National Conference a talk on diversity in school libraries. And as a cisgendered white female, I did that because I reckon diversity is everyone's business. And we've all got a stake in this, and we all need to get involved in it. As a board member, I'm already ensuring diversity by being the only director from the school library sector, because diversity is not as simple as gender or cultural diversity as well. We do need to represent all levels. The most important thing about diversity is that we need to understand our level of diversity, our lack of diversity, and consider other people's lived experiences along with our own.
Great, thanks a lot, Kathryn. Handing over to you, Claire.
Thanks, Phoebe. So I guess if I had to quickly sum up diversity to me, it means creating and championing safe spaces where voices can be heard and people can be visible. And so I think the best thing that I try and do in my work and also on the board is to champion others and to make space for different voices to be heard and different perspectives other than my own. So one of the achievements for the last board, the 2021 board, that I'm really proud to have been a part of was around progressing an Indigenous voice to the governance of ALIA. And so we now have the First Nations Expert Advisory Group who are coming together and who will self-determine how Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our profession are represented and contributing to ALIA's governance. So if we can do more of that, I'm hopeful that this board will actively live out the theme of diversity.
Thanks, Claire. That's a really important point. Janette.
Well, diversity for me, there's two things I want to say about it. One is I'm committed to celebrating diversity. And by that, I mean, we need to have welcoming libraries, welcoming spaces, inclusive spaces. And we also need to have diverse workforces. So it's really two-sided, you know, it's making sure we're welcoming everyone in. But making sure that our workforce is diverse. And I think that I've got a history in this space. I was one of the co-founders of the Status of Women in Librarianship back in 1983, which was a subgroup of the association all the way back then. And then throughout my career, I've been working with Indigenous communities at the State Library of Queensland, as Clare and others would know. We had Kurraldargan and the Indigenous Knowledge Centres throughout Queensland and the Torres Strait Islands as well. And even in my current role, we're now working to rename many of the library spaces in recognition of local First Nations communities. So I do have a record in that space, but I also see diversity as about providing access for everyone, whether the access needs to be for people with issues in mobility, whether there's a language issue or whether it's a geographic issue. I've been working to make sure that people in remote locations have access to library services. And my experience also goes right back to the 1990s at the State Library of New South Wales, when we were demonstrating for people with special needs who couldn't access the normal printed material in the library. We were providing access through Kurzweil reading machines. It was all about removing barriers to make access for diverse communities to use library services.
Great, thank you. And yeah, obviously diversity is one word and in a sense one concept, but it has so many different facets that clearly all of you are aware of and want to forward through your work on the board. Now, just to keep to time, the next question we had was to do with the top 2 or 3 priorities for the future of the association. And so I'm going to put you on the spot and just ask you for your top 1 priority for the future of the association. So yeah, if you could reduce your 2 to 3 and pick an absolute favourite. Kathryn, over to you.
Oh, that is so cruel.
It's cruel.
Absolutely
I'm sorry.
cruel. Okay, they're all pretty much in line with each other. They're not actually, you know, there's no favourite. I guess if I had to choose, I'm going to say that my key priority would be that we ensure that ALIA represents the needs of its membership above all else, assuming its governance is okay. The needs of the membership, tied to that, of course, are the broader needs of the profession. But we need to ensure there's a balance between the two and that member needs are at the forefront of all decisions. ALIA doesn't exist without its members. You could successfully argue that the library profession can exist without ALIA. It can and it does exist without ALIA and has done over years. However, ALIA cannot exist without its members. And we need to have that at the forefront at all times of the board members, and the decision-making processes that ALIA makes. But that's my top priority.
Great. That's great. That's strong. Thank you, Kathryn.
And I'll keep mine short and say ditto. Exactly the same. We have to be making sure that our membership value offer is the best that it can be for both personal and institutional members. 100% agree with what Kathryn said. It definitely has to be our top priority as the board.
Great, thank you. That's loud and clear. And Janette.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with either Kathryn or Clare on that, but I do want to say that for me, the top issue is advocacy and promotion of libraries and librarians. I want to ensure there's no dilution of the professional status and recognition of the library sector. I think we're not a union, but an industry association. And I think that gives us very broad responsibilities and includes, the higher values of, going into bat for the ABCs, archivists and librarians. We can take the high moral ground. We can say we are concerned about the fate of those collections for Australia, not just because we're a trade union wanting to protect people's jobs. So it is about the membership, but it's about the sector. It's about a professional standing and advocacy for libraries.
Great, thank you. And now we will play Hero Macdonald's pre-recording. So Jackie, I think you're going to share screen.
Hi everyone, my name's Hero Macdonald and I'm really sorry I can't be there in person for the interview today. I'm joining you from Wurundjeri country in Naarm, Melbourne at the Deakin downtown campus. So I've got 3 questions that I'll be responding to today. And the first question was for me to tell you about my career pathway to where I am now as the University Librarian at Deakin. I think that probably in response to that question, I'd say, I actually kind of came from a background in education, having trained and worked as a teacher before I decided to complete my master's in librarianship and ultimately pursuing a career in academic libraries. I think that background in education combined with my professional library qualification and all of the disciplinary and domain knowledge that came with that has ended up being a really, really powerful combination for me, and certainly has, I think, really enhanced my effectiveness as a librarian throughout my career. In my early career, I really saw that having that additional professional expertise, particularly in terms of that deep understanding of pedagogy and learning design, combined with the library knowledge and values and ethics, I think has really, allowed me to add a lot of values to the roles that I held, particularly, as I was working more in an academic library context. But I think certainly completing that graduate qualification was a really, really key part of helping me establish and form my professional identity and really understanding my role in that sort of broader information and knowledge management context. I think in my early career, I really focused on getting as much experience as I could get, across different library sectors. I worked in public and government and TAFE libraries and then landed in academic libraries a few years in. And I think that breadth was really fantastic in terms of giving me insights into the unique differences and also synergies between our various sectors, and certainly has enabled me to build a really strong and diverse professional network. However, as I said, the majority of my career has really been in academic libraries, and for me, that always really felt like the most natural fit. Over the last 10 years, I've held senior roles at Melbourne University, Deakin and UNSW. And in those roles, I've had the opportunity to lead some really fantastic projects, particularly around sort of transformational service and space redesign. I'm currently, as I said, the University Librarian at Deakin, and I was very much kind of drawn to Deakin in particular for the same reasons that I was really drawn to a career in librarianship. It's really around, that commitment to creating healthy, thriving communities, enabling lifelong learning, and, really ultimately working towards a socially just and progressive society. My career in library to date, I think, has been a really, really rich and fulfilling one. And it's enabled me to gain so much experience across a broad range of domains: strategic leadership and planning, government and risk management, program implementation and review, digital and service innovation, human-centered design, community engagement and consultation, and the list goes on. And that's in addition to all of the kind of what we sort of, generally refer to as core librarianship skills. And I think, to me, that really just speaks to the diversity of LIS roles and the complexity of the services that we provide and the landscapes that we are working within. And so I'm really looking forward to bringing those skills to the board. The second question was around what diversity means, noting that obviously ALIA's president, Vicky Edmonds, has chosen diversity as the theme for her tenure. To me, I think a commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion really sits right at the heart of my love of libraries and, certainly really deeply held professional and personal values. For me, though, I think diversity, it means many things. And I think when I think about that construct of diversity, it really has 3 kind of key components. One it's a demographic thing. It's about the demographic makeup of our LIS workforce. Diversity in this context is about ensuring that our organisational profile better reflects the communities that we serve in terms of ethnicity and age and gender and sexuality, language, life experience. And we know that that's a real challenge for our profession, which is very monocultural in many ways. So I think part of this is around how we develop strategies to nurture and grow a pipeline of future professionals that come from different places, different communities. And then it's about how we mentor those people to grow within the profession. It's also about how we overcome unconscious bias in recruitment. I think the second component around diversity for me is about acknowledging that we increasingly need a more diverse set of professional skill sets to run large and complex library services in particular. Many big libraries need a much broader range of skill sets than traditional librarian skills. And this is something that has been known and acknowledged for some time, but it's really thinking about how do we then, bring those diverse professionals into the fold, so to speak. I think the third component of diversity for me is really about acknowledging that library work is not neutral. The structures and ideologies underpinning many of our systems and processes and protocols and practices are based on very white and colonial and patriarchal ways of knowing. As librarians, embracing diversity is about ensuring that we are thinking critically about our practices and protocols, shaping people's, and thinking about how our work really shapes people's engagement with knowledge, and how our decisions might include or exclude groups of people. So it's about being much more conscious of those things. I think libraries at their core are very much about inclusion and equity and diversity, about democratizing access to information, but they're also really complex and political spaces. I think the questions that we have to ask are, whose stories are getting told and published? Who are the voices that we're hearing? Whose stories are we missing? How do we describe and think about knowledge? How does that reinforce particular ways of knowing and thinking about the world? So to me, that third component of diversity is thinking about how do we critically analyze our own practices and systems to essentially uncover and dismantle aspects of our practice that perpetuate systemic biases. So the third one is around my key priorities for the future of ALIA as our professional association. And I think my answer to that question is pretty simple. I'm looking for a well-governed professional association that both actively and effectively enables a thriving and successful library and information profession in Australia. I think in my role as ALIA Board Director, I really want to see us create a much more vibrant, engaged, diverse and future-focused professional association, one that works transparently, effectively and inclusively to deliver more value to members, and at the same time growing that membership base and engaging new members. I really want to see our professional association not just contributing to national debates, but actively shaping them. And in the process, I think really strengthening the integrity and reputation of our profession for the future. I think a really key enabler of this is obviously ensuring that we are able to articulate and maintain a clear, cohesive professional identity based on a solid foundation of LIS domain knowledge, ethics and values. And key to this is ensuring the viability and sustainability of our education programs, making sure that we're actively growing that disciplinary base for our profession, and making sure that we've got that strong focus on evidence-based practice within the work that we do. I think, as we've talked about before in the other responses, it's also about ensuring that we are maximizing the diversity of our profession, considering all those dimensions that I was talking about earlier, making sure that we're not only bringing the right skill sets into the fold, but we're also making sure that we've got a real diversity of experience and perspective around the table to make sure that we reflect the communities that we serve, and that we're able to really, I think, authentically and critically interrogate our professional practices. And as I was saying before, actively dismantling those biases. I think part of the role of ALIA here is really to ensure that we continue to communicate and indeed increase the effectiveness of that communication about the value and impact of not just libraries, but the LIS professionals who make them run.
So huge thanks to Hero for doing that pre-record. That was really great. I know that we're at 1:30 now, and so I understand if anyone has to peel off back to work, but we have the agreement of all our board members that they'll stick around for a little bit of time to answer any questions. And we have a question from Andrew. So if Andrew, you're happy to go off mute and ask that, that would be great.
Thanks, Phoebe. So my question to the board members is, the ABC's recent staffing announcement is not the first time we've seen massive downsizing and restructure of library workplaces in recent years, and unfortunately it won't be the last. However, this was the first time that I can recall personally ALIA taking such a huge and openly vocal response to this kind of decision, which definitely to ALIA's credit, it's the kind of proactive response we want to see. And I like to think this is in part thanks to the current lineup we have on the board. So my question is, do you see ALIA continuing to respond in the same way to other future, industrial issues as they arise? And how do we avoid a perceived conflict of interest in doing so, given that our membership is made up of individuals and library and employers?
I'd like to respond if I can. Thank you for your question, Andrew, and I have to give credit to our new CEO and the ALIA team, because the initiative was generated from Kathy and Trish, and whilst I think new and existing board members definitely backed the approach to the managing director of the ABC, it was initiated from ALIA itself rather than from individual board members, although I know we all agree with what was done. But I actually would like to comment on that question, because when the association is not a union, and many of the LIS professionals are in unions, although there is increasingly, sole operators and people working in different sectors that are not unionised, including Parliament houses all over the country. but I used to think it was a bad idea to have the mixture of the professionals and the institutions in the association. I now think it's a very good idea, and I'm very glad that in this case we were able to take them a high moral ground and talk about the potential for the mismanagement of those collections for Australia's interests, not just for the interest of a narrow professional group. So I think that was a very positive thing in this case. And I would hope that we would make sure that we're vocal and we do go in and make these representations on an ongoing basis.
Would either you, Kathryn or Claire, like to respond to that one, or Kathy to speak to that point?
I'm happy to just make a couple of quick points, and thanks, Janette, for your sort of generous acknowledgement of the work. And Trish was absolutely and continues to be a driving force in terms of ABC's response to ABC, and we're getting more and more signatures and doing different things, as you can see. I think it's a really interesting point that you raise, Andrew, about sort of the conflict of interest, and and I agree with everything Janette said about we're not a union, etc. And in fact, we actually started the conversation with the ABC managing director making that point, so he sort of knew that we weren't there, banging a certain drum. Just in the few weeks I've been here, we've had an occasion where a journalist approached us to say, oh, there's a particular library in I can't remember, it was a particular region in Victoria, which was shutting down or reducing its opening hours. And, you know, would ALIA comment on that? And that was one where, you know, the conflict of interest absolutely was there, because it's like, well, you know, depending on where it was, it's likely that local government or that council was a member of ALIA. And even if it wasn't, it could be. And so we have to sort of be quite careful. And to Kathryn's point earlier about, you know, we have to put the members' interests first and foremost, and then the profession second, etc. And I think that's a really interesting sort of discussion for the board to have about what is our purpose. And you have to sort of choose a primary beneficiary, I think, and then have other beneficiaries afterwards. But with that situation with that local council, you know, we basically gave our generic response about, you know, the importance of sort of opening hours, etc., and the certain standards for libraries. But we weren't going to dive into the debate about that particular library because, you know, the world's not a perfect place and different choices need to be made. And so that was an example where we didn't sort of go in boots and all because of those sort of sensitivities. So I think it is something we need to be mindful of. But I come from a background working in government and with a legal background, and in some ways I'm very used to being cautious and as most lawyers are, quite risk averse. But on the other hand, one of the things I love about this role is I feel like I'm sort of the shackles are off in terms of not being able to say things because you're in government and things. And so I think there's a real freedom to that. And I'm very happy to sort of use that wisely and carefully, but use that when we can to support the profession.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Anne Ritchie has a question that I will read out, and Anne's question is: how do you think that ALIA can engage more with employers to help strengthen our library schools and the education of our next generation of librarians and library technicians? So that's throwing to all three of you equally.
Well, I guess the response I'd point to on this one is that ALIA is already doing this through the investment in the Professional Pathways Project, which is a multi-year, multi-million-dollar project to invest in the future of both LIS education, but also employers and the professional skills that our members need for bright and vibrant careers. So there's quite a lot of work happening in that space with that nexus across the educators, the employers and the individuals. And certainly with the next stage, the consultation phase that will be launched shortly, there'll be opportunity for all of representatives of all those groups to come together and provide feedback and evidence to the next phase of that project. So I think we are already doing quite a lot in that, and the board is obviously very cognizant of the reduced number of education programs in our country and the risks that poses to the future of our profession, and removing barriers for people to join us. So I think there's a lot of work already going on in this space, and I'd encourage everyone to participate in professional pathways in the next consultation round if at all possible.
Thanks, Claire. Janette, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to add to that, and absolutely, I think professional pathways is the association making inroads into this space. But I've been disappointed coming back into Australia to discover so many of the library schools closing down, teaching out, and not being there in the future. But I've been reflecting on that in the last month or so, and I see it now as a potential, an opportunity. So it was clearly a threat to the profession, but I think it's also an opportunity. And we were Phoebe gave us an opportunity to think about whether, if there was going to be more time in this session, if we could wave a magic wand and make something happen, what would we want to have happen? And the thing I thought about would be federal funding for a national school of library and information science with national scholarships for First Nations people of culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and a way for us to actually develop something new in this space, and maybe if, you know, I mean, if it was a magic wand and it was funded and there were scholarships for people to come from all over the country to participate, this would give us an opportunity to create the kind of professionals we think we need for tomorrow, for today and tomorrow.
Thanks, Janette. Kathryn, did you have anything you wanted to add to that question?
Sure. Look, it's really, really complex, and I think libraries and library world have been sort of tackling this for a few decades now, because the library world has changed phenomenally over the second half of the last century. I think with library schools closing down and the reduction in courses, it all points back to the way libraries are valued, or the perceived value of libraries in the world. And so we've got to be able to change that. There's a lot of research coming out now, and there has always been a lot of research about the values, the value added of libraries and librarians and fully trained librarians. However, particularly in the school sector, we have people being hired that don't have the library training. So there's things wrong across the board. So we need to be making sure that we're absolutely educating the policymakers, the politicians, the people that control the purse strings. They need to actually have a real life view of what libraries do and who librarians are and the benefits. So we've got to be attacking it from that perspective, so that then they're realizing the value and they'll fund the library schools. They won't close down the library schools. We've got to be meeting with the school principals and meeting with the decision makers of all the areas of the library world, so that the principals don't hire people that aren't qualified, or that they absolutely value this beautiful resource. And it's such an expensive resource, but it's completely devalued if you don't put somebody in there that can use it properly. So we've got to sort of unwind things and go back to the beginning and say, why are we in this situation? What's going wrong? And how will we attack it? The archivist letter is a great thing to show the power of the association and the power of our memberships and all the people that we link to, because we have such a wide network amongst all of us. It shows what we can do, and it gives immediate support to the members, makes them realize straight away, wow, this is what ALIA is doing. This is what they're doing to support us. This isn't okay. We're not going to put up with this. And ALIA stepped forward and made a stance. They could do that in lots of different areas when there's decimation of library jobs. They could approach I know Janette said we're not a union, but you certainly could approach the Independent Education Union. You could approach Teachers Federation anytime these things happen. The principals all have associations and groups of principals. We could be approaching it on that level and making sure they're all educated and they know what the importance of libraries and trained library staff is. And then it will be a no-brainer that they'll fund it.
Great, thank you. It's really exciting to see how very quickly the conversation and discussion has got to the the crux of business, and that we're not just working around on the edges. It's really great. I am aware of the time, and I think it's time to let people go, but it has been terrific to talk to you, Claire, Janette, Kathryn, about your priorities for your terms on the ALIA board and work upcoming. So we're really, really lucky to have such a breadth of experience and solid ethics and values guiding our work. We'll be back for another Insight and Conversation in September. That'll coincide with the next edition of Insight magazine, which is on the theme of thinking global. If any of you would like to write for Insight, please take a look at the ALIA website where you can see the themes of upcoming issues. Thank you once again for talking with me and for your time, Janette, Claire, Kathryn, and Hero, who's not here. And thanks to Jackie, who's on team, and thanks as well, Kathy, for joining into that conversation. Until the next time, thanks very much for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.